For 7 years, the Alpha King's son woke to silence. No heartbeat, no pack song, no father's voice calling his name through the corridors of the obsidian fortress. Every full moon, the healers of Varen stood in a ring around Prince Orin and delivered the same verdict with practiced sorrow in their eyes. It is the goddess's will, your magency. We can try again next cycle. And every time, they sent new ledgers to the royal treasury. Lucian Draven paid, with gold stacked high enough to build a second fortress, with blood drawn from his own veins for rituals that left him weak for days, with pieces of his soul that he could never get back. He let them press burning sigils to his son's skin, pour bitter tinctures between small lips that trembled but made no sound, cut new scars over old ones until the boy's back looked like a map of failed promises. Each time, the healers shook their heads. Each time, they promised that the next treatment would be different. Each time, they walked away richer while the prince stayed silent. But high above the ritual chamber, in the narrow servants' gallery where no one ever looked up, a pair of omega eyes watched everything. Calla Riven, the girl Lucian once promised forever to. The mate he rejected under a hall of witnesses 7 winters ago. The omega they exiled, and then quietly forgot. She'd come back under a false name, hands smelling of herbs and ash, head bowed so no one saw the flash of recognition when Lucian entered the room. But her wolf didn't bow. Her wolf remembered the way his hand once bracketed her jaw in the forest, the way his voice dropped low when he said her name like a vow he meant to keep. Tonight, Calla isn't watching Lucian. She's watching the boy. Orin's small fingers keep drifting to the base of his skull, to a spot just behind his ear, flinching each time a healer's hand passes too close. Not random, not reflex. Pain. Repeated, ignored. Something is wrong here. Wrong beyond grief. Wrong beyond fate. And Calla is the only one who sees it. Before we tear open the secret buried in the prince's body, before we reach the moment the Alpha King realizes who he threw away, I need you with me. If stories like this pull at something deep in your chest, hit subscribe to Ariel Romance Library right now. Tap that bell so you don't miss a single chapter. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. This story found you for a reason. The obsidian fortress sat like a black crown on the mountain, stone towers clawing at the sky. Inside, wolves moved through corridors lit by torches that never seemed to warm the air. At the heart of it all, in a chamber carved from volcanic glass, a 7-year-old prince sat perfectly still, while strangers touched his skin. Orin Draven had ice-pale eyes like his father, and dark hair like the mother he never knew. He watched the healers' mouths move, forming words he couldn't hear. Their hands pressed glowing symbols into the air above his head. Incense burned, candles flickered. The ritual went on for hours. It always went on for hours. His father stood in the corner, arms crossed, jaw tight. Lucian Draven looked like a king carved from stone and fury. His wolf prowled just beneath his skin, amber eyes flashing in the torchlight when his patience wore thin. The head healer, Era Thorn, finally stepped back from the circle. She was a tall woman, with silver-streaked hair and robes that cost more than most wolves earned in a year. Her voice was smooth as river stones. Your Majesty, the blockage remains. The moonborn affliction is stronger than we anticipated. Lucian's hands curled into fists. You said that last month, and the month before. These things take time, Era said, her face arranged in practiced sympathy. The goddess works in cycles. We can try again at the next full moon. There's a ritual from the northern ice clans that might help. It requires rare herbs and 3 days of preparation. How much? 10,000 gold pieces, plus the cost of the materials. Lucian didn't flinch. He never did. Do it. Era bowed. You have my word, Your Majesty. We will not rest until the prince is whole. The other healers filed out, robes whispering against stone. Lucian waited until they were gone before crossing to his son. He knelt, bringing himself to eye level with Orin. His large hands framed the boy's small face, thumbs brushing his cheeks. Orin couldn't hear the words his father spoke, but he felt the warmth of them against his skin. He leaned into the touch, eyes closing. For a moment, they stayed like that, breathing in the same space. Then Lucian stood, shoulders heavy, and left the chamber. Orin sat alone in the circle of burnt herbs and cooling candles. His fingers drifted to the back of his neck, pressing against a spot that always hurt, always burned. His face pinched, a small sound escaping his throat that no one was there to hear. But someone was watching. High above, in the servants' gallery carved into the wall, Calla Riven pressed her palm flat against the stone railing. Her breath came shallow. Her wolf snarled in her chest, recognizing pain when it saw it. She'd been back in the fortress for 3 weeks, working under the name Mira Vale, scrubbing floors and hauling water for the healers. No one looked at Omegas long enough to recognize a face from 7 years ago. No one except the wolf inside her that still knew Lucian's scent from across a crowded room. But tonight, she wasn't thinking about the Alpha King. She was thinking about his son, the way Oren's fingers kept returning to that same spot, the way his eyes squeezed shut when the healers touched near his ear, the way his breathing changed, quickened, when certain herbs were burned. Calla had seen pain before. She'd grown up in a healer's cottage on the edge of the Packlands, learning herbs and bone setting from her grandmother. She knew what sickness looked like, what injury looked like. This wasn't either of those things. This looked like someone had planted suffering in a child's body and was watering it with gold. She stayed in the gallery long after the torches burned low, watching Oren finally climb down from the ritual platform and shuffle toward the door. He moved like a boy twice his age, careful and cautious, one hand trailing along the wall. Calla's grandmother used to say that healing started with seeing what others refused to look at. She was starting to see something no one wanted her to find. 7 years earlier, under a moon so full it looked like a silver plate hung in the sky, Calla had stood in the forest with Lucian's hand on her jaw and his breath warm against her throat. "Mine," he'd whispered, the word more growl than speech. "The moon chose you. I choose you." His thumb traced the line of her bottom lip. His other hand settled at her hip, fingers pressing through the thin fabric of her dress. The mate bond hummed between them like a living wire, pulling them closer. Calla's wolf sang. Her whole body leaned into him, drawn by something older than law, deeper than rank. When Lucian's mouth hovered just above hers, she could taste his breath, feel the heat radiating from his skin. "Say it," he commanded softly. "Yours," she whispered back. The kiss that should have come next never happened. A howl split the night, then another. The pack summons, urgent and sharp. Lucien pulled back, frustration flickering across his face before duty smothered it. "Wait for me," he said. "Don't move from this spot. I'll come back and finish what we started." But when he came back 3 days later, it wasn't to kiss her. It was to reject her in front of the entire pack council. They said the mate test was forged, that she'd used her grandmother's old magic to trick the moon ceremony, that an Omega couldn't possibly be marked for an Alpha King, not when the realm needed alliances and treaties and a Luna of proper blood. Lucien stood at the head of the council chamber, jaw tight, eyes anywhere but on her face. "The bond is false," he declared, voice flat. "Calla Riven is not my mate. She is expelled from this pack for deception and false prophecy." The words hit like claws to the chest. Calla's wolf howled inside her, thrashing against the rejection like a trapped animal. Her knees buckled. Someone caught her arm, dragged her upright, marched her toward the gates. She looked back once. Lucien was watching her then, finally, and the pain in his eyes almost made her believe he didn't want this. Almost. But he didn't stop them. Didn't call her back. Didn't defend the bond their wolves still screamed for. So she left. 7 years in exile. 7 years scraping together survival in packs that didn't trust wanderers. 7 years carrying the weight of a rejection that should have killed her but somehow didn't. Now, Calla stood in the healer's wing of the obsidian fortress, scrubbing blood from stone floors with hands rubbed raw from lye. The same hands that once held a future king were now invisible, forgettable, exactly what she needed them to be. "Mira." Thorn's voice cut through her thoughts. "Take these herbs to the preparation room. Don't touch the sealed jars. They're expensive." Calla kept her head down. "Yes, Healer Thorn." She gathered the basket and moved through the corridors, keeping to the shadows. The fortress hadn't changed much. Same cold stone, same torches casting long shadows, same scent of pine and wolf fur and old magic soaked into the walls. She passed the great hall where Lucien had rejected her, past the courtyard where they'd first danced during a harvest moon celebration, past the archives where he'd once pulled her into a dark corner and kissed her breathless when no one was looking. Every step hurt. Every breath was a reminder that she'd loved a man who chose his crown over her heart. But she wasn't here for him. She was here because an Omega healer from the southern forests had sent word of strange happenings in the capital. Expensive treatments that never worked. A prince trapped in silence while gold poured into healer coffers. Calla's grandmother had taught her that healers served the wounded, not their own wealth. If someone was breaking that sacred duty, she needed to know. She was placing the herbs in the preparation room when she heard small footsteps behind her. Oren stood in the doorway, pale eyes watching her. He'd seen her before in passing, another faceless servant in a fortress full of them. But something had drawn him here now. Calla set down the basket slowly. She didn't speak, knowing he couldn't hear her. Instead, she crouched down to his level and smiled. Oren tilted his head, curious. His fingers drifted to the back of his neck again, that familiar gesture of discomfort. Calla's wolf stirred with protective fury. She reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away if he wanted. When he didn't, she brushed her fingers against his hand, gently pulling it away from his neck. She pressed her palm to his, showing him the gesture. Connection. Safety. Oren's eyes widened. He pressed back, harder than she expected, like someone desperate for an anchor. They stayed like that, palm to palm in the doorway, until a shadow fell across them both. "Step away from my son." Lucian's voice was ice and fury. Cala's entire body went rigid. She stood slowly, keeping herself between Oren and his father without thinking. Their eyes met for the first time in 7 years. Recognition slammed into Lucian like a physical blow. His wolf surged forward, amber bleeding into his eyes. The mate bond, buried under years and rejection and distance, flared to life between them. Cala felt it too. The pull, the hunger. The wolf inside her that still knew his scent, still wanted his touch, still hated him for everything he'd done. "Your Majesty," she said quietly, using the false name. "I meant no harm." Lucian stared at her like she was a ghost. His hand twitched at his side, fingers curling as if fighting the urge to reach for her. Behind him, Oren tugged at his father's sleeve, trying to pull him toward Cala instead of away. "Who are you?" Lucian asked, though his wolf already knew the answer. "No one important," Cala said. "Just a healer's assistant." She moved to step around him, but Lucian's hand shot out, catching her wrist. The contact burned, the bond sang. His thumb found her pulse, pressing against the racing rhythm there. "I know you," he breathed. "You're mistaken," Cala said, pulling free with effort. "Excuse me, Your Majesty." She walked away before her wolf could do something stupid like lean into him, before the tears building behind her eyes could fall, before Oren could see the way her hands shook. Behind her, Lucian stood frozen in the hallway, his son clinging to his leg, staring after the Omega who just shattered 7 years of carefully built walls with a single touch. Cala started watching Oren the way her grandmother had taught her to watch illness. Patiently, carefully, looking for patterns others missed. During the healer's morning rounds, she stayed in the background, carrying supplies and keeping her eyes down. But she noticed everything. When Darian Voss, a sharp-faced healer with cold hands, examined Oren's neck, the boy's breathing quickened. When Arathorn burned a particular blend of herbs, Oren's fingers dug into his palms. When they touched the area behind his left ear, his whole body went rigid. No one else seemed to see it. Or if they did, they didn't care. Cala began leaving small things for Oren in places only he would find them. A smooth river stone that smelled of mint, a sprig of lavender tucked under his pillow, a piece of honeycomb wrapped in cloth. She was building trust the only way she could, through scent and touch, the language wolves understood before words. One afternoon, she found him in the fortress gardens, sitting beside a fountain with his hand trailing in the water. The sun caught his dark hair, turning it blue-black. He looked so small against the stone walls surrounding them. Cala sat down nearby, not close enough to intrude, just close enough to be noticed. She pulled out a leather pouch and emptied its contents onto the bench between them. Smooth stones, each one different. She picked one up and traced its shape slowly, then set it down and picked up another. Oren watched. After a moment, he reached for a stone, copying her movements. His small fingers explored the grooves and edges. Cala smiled and picked up a new stone, this one rough. She exaggerated her reaction, face scrunching up. Oren's lips twitched, almost a smile. They played like that for nearly an hour, communicating through touch and expression. No words needed, just connection. Cala was reaching for another stone when Oren suddenly grabbed her hand. His face had gone pale, eyes pinched with pain. His other hand flew to the back of his neck, pressing hard against that same spot. She moved on instinct, pulling him close. Her fingers found the area he kept touching, feeling carefully through his hair and skin. There was heat there, unnatural heat, and beneath it, something that felt like ridged scars. Oren trembled against her, small body curled into her side. Cala wrapped her arms around him, murmuring words he couldn't hear but might feel in the vibration of her chest. "I've got you," she whispered. "I've got you." The pain seemed to ease after several minutes. Oren's breathing slowed. His fingers loosened their grip on her dress. That was when she felt the other presence. Lucian stood at the garden entrance, watching them with an expression Cala couldn't read. Not anger this time. Something more complicated. His eyes moved between his son and the Omega holding him, and the mate bond thrummed with emotions too tangled to name. He approached slowly, like they were wild things that might bolt. When he reached them, he crouched down, bringing himself level with Oren. The boy turned toward his father's scent, relaxing further. Lucian's hand settled on Oren's back, his fingers close enough to brush Cala's arm. The contact made them both freeze. "He trusts you," Lucian said quietly. He shouldn't, Calla replied. I'm no one. Stop lying. His eyes found hers. I know who you are, Calla. Hearing her name in his voice after 7 years of silence felt like claws and honey both. She looked away first. Then you know I'm not supposed to be here. And yet you are. His hand moved, deliberate, covering hers where it rested on Oren's shoulder. Why? The question held layers. Why come back? Why risk being seen? Why touch his son when touching anything that belonged to the Alpha King could be considered treason? Because he's in pain, Calla said simply, and no one else seems to notice. Something shifted in Lucien's expression. His thumb brushed against her knuckles, a whisper of contact that sent heat racing up her arm. Tell me what you see. Calla hesitated. Then slowly, carefully, she guided Lucien's hand to the back of Oren's neck. Here, press gently. Lucien did. Oren flinched, a small sound escaping him. Lucien's face went very still. How long has this been happening? I don't know, Calla said. But every time the healers touch this area, he reacts. Every time they burn certain herbs, his pain worsens. Your Majesty, this doesn't feel like a goddess-born affliction. What does it feel like? Their eyes met over Oren's head, and Calla saw something in Lucien she hadn't expected. Doubt. The great Alpha King, who'd conquered 3 territories and commanded 1,000 wolves, looked lost. It feels like someone hurt him on purpose, she whispered, and they've been hurting him for a very long time. The words settled between them like stones. Lucien's hand tightened on hers, not pulling away, not letting go, just holding on like she was the only solid thing in a world suddenly tilted sideways. Oren shifted, pulling both their attention back to him. He'd fallen asleep, exhausted from the pain episode, curled between them like a bridge. I have to go, Calla said, though she didn't move. Stay. Lucien's voice was rough. Just for a moment. Let him rest. So she stayed, sitting in the garden with the Alpha King who'd broken her heart, holding the prince who might break it again in an entirely different way. The late afternoon sun painted gold across the stones. Somewhere in the fortress, wolves howled the hour, and Lucien's hand stayed warm on hers, neither of them willing to be the first to let go. That night, Calla waited until the fortress settled into sleep before making her way to the healer's archives. The room was locked, but her grandmother had taught her more than herb lore. The old magic came easily, a whisper of power against the metal mechanism. The door swung open. Inside, shelves climbed toward vaulted ceilings, packed with scrolls and journals dating back generations. The air smelled of parchment and dust and secrets. Calla moved quickly. Scanning through treatment records for Oren's name, she found the first entry from when he was 6 months old. A fever. Nothing unusual. Then more entries. Regular checkups. Growth measurements. All normal until his 2nd birthday. That's when the word affliction first appeared. The entries after that grew longer, more detailed. Failed rituals. Experimental treatments. Rare herbs imported from across the realm. Each one noted with costs that made Calla's stomach turn. She found a locked drawer beneath the main desk. This lock took longer to open. The magic darker. Designed to keep people out. Inside, she found what she was looking for. A medical sketch of a child's skull, marked with symbols Calla recognized from her grandmother's forbidden books. Sigils of binding. Sigils of sealing. Lines drawn from the inner ear to the base of the skull, annotated in handwriting so precise it looked like art. Subject A, D, read the notes. Blockage maintained. Recommend quarterly reinforcement. Duration. Indefinite for optimal financial yield. Calla's hands shook as she read further. Detailed instructions for mixing a resin compound that would harden in the ear canal. Directions for placing carved bone fragments beneath the skin to maintain magical pressure. Notes about adjusting dosages based on the king's desperation levels. It wasn't a curse. It was construction. Someone had deliberately stolen Oren's hearing and built an entire system to keep it stolen. What are you doing in here? Calla spun. Darian Voss stood in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes sharp. She thought quickly. Healer Thorn sent me to fetch the northern ritual supplies. She forgot to tell me which shelf. Those are kept in the eastern storeroom, not the archives. Darian moved closer. And that drawer is sealed for a reason. I must have gotten confused, Calla said, easing toward the door. My apologies. Darian's hand shot out, catching her arm. His grip was tight, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. Who are you really? No one, Calla said. Just a healer's assistant. Healer's assistants don't know old magic. Darian's eyes narrowed. And they don't break seals designed to keep out nosy omegas. Calla's wolf rose up, protective and fierce. She met Darian's gaze without flinching. Let go of me. Not until you tell me what you found. The door slammed open. Lucien filled the frame, alpha power rolling off him in waves. His eyes went straight to Darian's hand on Cala's arm. "Remove your hand from her," Lucian said quietly. "Now." Darian dropped her arm like it burned. "Your Majesty, I found this Omega going through sealed records, and I'll deal with it," Lucian said. "Leave us." Darian hesitated, then bowed stiffly, and left. His footsteps echoed down the corridor, angry and fast. Lucian closed the door. He turned to Cala, and she braced herself for his fury. Instead, he asked, "What did you find?" Cala's throat tightened. She held up the sketch. "Proof." Lucian took the parchment, reading in the dim light. His face went blank, the kind of blank that meant a storm was building underneath. "They did this," he said slowly. "The healers. To my son." "Yes," Cala whispered. "For money." "Yes." Lucian's hand crumpled the parchment. His wolf surged forward, amber flooding his eyes, canines lengthening. The air in the room grew thick with barely controlled rage. "How long have you known?" "I suspected 3 days ago," Cala said. "I confirmed it tonight. Why didn't you come to me?" "Because 7 years ago, you chose them over me," Cala said, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "You stood in front of the council and called me a liar. You let them exile me for telling the truth about our bond. Why would I trust you to believe me now?" The words landed like blows. Lucian flinched, some of the rage draining into something closer to pain. "Cala, don't," she said. "I didn't come back for you. I came back for him. For Oren. Because no child deserves what they've done to him." Lucian set the crumpled parchment on the desk. He moved toward her slowly, giving her space to back away if she wanted. When she didn't, he stopped close enough that she could feel the heat of him. "I was a coward 7 years ago," he said quietly. "The council gave me a choice. Keep you, and lose the alliance that would prevent war, or reject you, and save 300 lives. I chose wrong. I know I did, but I won't choose wrong again." His hand came up, cupping her jaw the way he had that night in the forest. His thumb traced her cheekbone. "Help me save him," Lucian said. "Please." The touch made Cala's wolf whine, made her body lean into him despite everything, made 7 years of pain and distance feel paper thin. "If I do this," Cala said, "if I break the seal they've put on him, they'll call it treason, blood magic, forbidden healing. They'll have me executed." "No one will touch you," Lucian said, and power thrummed in the words. "Alpha, command, mate promise. I swear it." Cala closed her eyes, felt his breath against her skin, felt the mate bond singing between them, stretching across the years of silence. "We'll need the moon chamber," she said. "Tonight, while the healers sleep. Done, and you have to trust me, no matter what you see, no matter what it looks like I'm doing. Can you do that?" Lucian's other hand came up, framing her face, tilting her head until she opened her eyes and looked at him. "I trust you," he said. "I should have trusted you 7 years ago. I should have fought for you. I should have chosen you over everything else. But I trust you now, with my son's life, with everything." Cala's breath caught. The way he was looking at her, like she was the only thing in the world that mattered, like he might kiss her right here surrounded by evidence of betrayal and old grief. "Lucian," she whispered. "Tell me you feel it too," he said roughly. "Tell me the bond didn't die. Tell me I didn't ruin everything." "I feel it," Cala admitted, and the truth of it cracked something open inside her. "I've felt it every day for 7 years. I've hated you for it, hated myself for it, but I feel it." Lucian's forehead dropped to hers. They stood there, breathing the same air, wolves circling each other beneath their skin. The kiss hovering between them felt inevitable. Then footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. They broke apart. Lucian tucked the crumpled sketch inside his coat. Cala smoothed her dress with shaking hands. "Midnight," Lucian said. "The moon chamber. I'll bring Oren. I'll be there." He left first, alpha power cloaking his exit. Cala waited several heartbeats before following, slipping back into the shadows where Omegas belonged, but her lips still tingled from where his breath had touched them, and her wolf still sang with the promise of what might come after they saved his son. Midnight found Cala in her small servant's quarters, staring at the tools laid out on her bed. A curved blade her grandmother had used for blood magic, a vial of moon-cooled oil blessed by an old priestess, strips of cloth soaked in herbs that would dull pain without stealing consciousness, and a small charm carved from bone, etched with symbols of protection. If she did this, there was no going back. The healers would know someone broke their seal. They'd hunt for who had the skill and knowledge. They'd find her eventually, but if she didn't do it, Oren would spend the rest of his life in silence, in pain, feeding gold into the pockets of wolves who'd turned healing into profit. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. Calla gathered the tools into a leather satchel and slipped out of her room. The fortress was quiet, most wolves deep in sleep. She moved through shadow-dark corridors toward the moon chamber, a place so old it predated the current fortress. Lucien was already there, standing beside one of the massive stone pillars carved with ancient wolf symbols. Orin sat on the raised platform at the chamber's center, looking small and scared. When he saw Calla, his face brightened. He reached for her. Calla climbed onto the platform and pulled Orin into her lap. His small body relaxed against hers, trusting. "We should talk about what happens next," Lucien said quietly. "There's nothing to talk about," Calla replied. "Either this works or it doesn't. Either they arrest me after or they don't." "Calla, I need you to hold him," she interrupted. "Sit behind him. Keep him steady. This is going to hurt, and he needs to feel safe." Lucien climbed onto the platform. He positioned himself at Orin's back, arms coming around his son, hands ready to hold him if he struggled. It meant Calla was bracketed between them both, Orin in her lap, Lucien's chest against her spine. The mate bond roared to life at the proximity, making her hands shake. "Are you afraid?" Lucien asked, voice low near her ear. "Terrified," Calla admitted. "Of failing? Of succeeding?" She turned her head slightly, finding his eyes in the dim chamber. "If this works, your son will hear for the first time. He'll hear your voice, the pack, everything, and you'll realize you don't need me anymore." Lucien's hand came up, fingers threading through hers where they rested on Orin's shoulder. "I'll always need you." The words hit her chest like a physical impact. Before she could respond, Orin shifted, pulling their attention back. "We need to start," Calla said. She opened her satchel and pulled out the tools. The blade gleamed in the moonlight streaming through the chamber's open roof. She poured moon-cooled oil into her palm, warming it. "Whatever you see," Calla said. "Whatever happens, don't stop me. Promise." "I promise," Lucien said. Calla's fingers found the base of Orin's skull, feeling for the raised lines she'd noticed before. There, sigils carved into bone beneath the skin, maintaining the magical seal. She whispered old words her grandmother had taught her, calling on power that predated pack law. Her fingers began to glow with soft silver light. Orin tensed. Lucien's arms tightened around him, murmuring reassurance. Calla traced counter sigils over the existing marks, unwinding the magic thread by thread. The air grew thick, power crackled. Orin whimpered, and the sound tore at Calla's heart. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." She worked carefully, precisely, feeling where the old magic had dug in deep. When she found the first piece of carved bone beneath his skin, she reached for her blade. "Hold him," she said. Lucien's hands moved to Orin's shoulders, keeping him still. Calla's blade pressed against skin, cutting shallow, letting blood well up. She worked the bone fragment free, pulling it out with tweezers. It was tiny, no bigger than a grain of rice, but etched with symbols of binding. Orin cried out soundlessly, body jerking. Calla's chest ached. "Almost done," she lied. She was nowhere near done. There were more fragments, more sigils, and worst of all, the resin compound blocking his inner ear. She worked for what felt like hours. Lucien's presence steady behind her, his breath at her neck, his hands helping guide Orin when she needed. They moved together like they'd done this 1,000 times, anticipating each other's movements. At one point, Calla had to lean back fully against Lucien's chest to get the right angle. His arms came around them both, holding them steady. Their heads were close enough that his jaw brushed her temple. "You're incredible," he murmured. "I'm a criminal," Calla said, her hands still glowing, still working. "You're a miracle," Lucien corrected. Finally, she reached the resin compound. It had hardened like stone, embedded deep. This would be the worst part. Calla soaked cloth strips in moon oil and packed them around the blockage, letting the magic soften it. Then, with the blade heated over a conjured flame, she began to carefully dissolve and extract the compound. Orin screamed. The sound was raw, broken, the first real cry he'd made that wasn't silent. It echoed through the chamber, bouncing off ancient stones. Calla's vision blurred with tears. She kept working. Lucien buried his face against Orin's hair, rocking him gently, whispering words the boy still couldn't hear, but might feel in the vibration. The last piece of resin came free. Silence. Calla sat back, exhausted, hands trembling. Blood smeared her fingers. Moon oil stained her dress. Behind her, Lucien's heartbeat thundered against her spine. They waited. Orin's breathing gradually slowed. He lifted his head from where it had been pressed against Calla's shoulder. Then he flinched. Hard. His eyes went wide. His hands flew to his ears. His mouth opened in shock. He could hear the whisper of wind through the chamber, the distant howl of wolves in the valley, Lucien's ragged breathing, Cala's soft sob. Oren turned toward his father, and for the first time in 7 years, he heard his father's voice. "Oren?" Lucien's voice cracked. "Can you hear me?" Oren's face crumpled. He launched himself at Lucien, small arms wrapping around his father's neck, and then he spoke, the word rough and unpracticed but clear. "Dad." Lucien broke. "Great." Shaking sobs tore from his chest as he clutched his son. Years of grief and guilt and helpless fury poured out of him. Cala tried to slip away, to give them this moment. Lucien's hand shot out, catching hers. "Stay." Oren turned to her too, reaching for her even while still in his father's arms. His small hand found hers. "Cala," he whispered, trying out her name, hearing it for the first time in his own voice. The three of them sat tangled together on the platform, bathed in moonlight, surrounded by the evidence of broken magic. A king, a prince, and an Omega who'd just committed treason to save them both. And in that moment, with Lucien's hand warm around hers and Oren's smile brighter than any moon, Cala thought maybe it was worth it. Whatever came next, this was worth it. Morning came too fast. By the time the sun rose over the obsidian fortress, whispers had already started. The prince was different. The prince was walking through corridors, turning toward sounds. The prince had smiled at a bird's song. The healers noticed immediately. By midday, they'd summoned a council in the great hall. Era Thorn stood at the center, silver hair gleaming, face arranged in righteous fury. "Someone has tampered with the prince," she declared. "Someone has used forbidden magic in direct violation of pack law." The hall filled with wolves, all watching as Lucien entered with Oren at his side. The boy's hand was clasped in his father's, and for the first time, when someone spoke, Oren's eyes tracked toward the sound. Cala stood in the servants' gallery, watching from above, knowing what was coming. "This is blood magic," Darian Voss said, stepping forward. "The kind that requires authorization from the High Council." "No one had that authorization. Someone did it anyway," Era said smoothly. "And they must be held accountable. Not only did they break our most sacred laws, they put the prince at risk. What if the ritual had failed? What if the prince had been hurt worse?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Several wolves nodded agreement. "Who did this?" Era demanded, her voice carrying. "Who dared touch the Alpha King's son without permission?" Lucien's jaw was tight. His eyes scanned the gallery, finding Cala. A silent communication passed between them. Before he could speak, Cala stepped forward to the gallery railing. "I did," she called down. Every head turned. Wolves who hadn't looked at her once in 3 weeks suddenly saw her clearly. Era's eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" "Her name is Cala Riven," Lucien said, his voice carrying through the hall. "And before you condemn her, you should see what she found." He pulled the crumpled sketch from inside his coat and held it up. "This was in your locked drawer, Healer Thorn. Care to explain the notes about optimal financial yield?" Era's face went carefully blank. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" Lucien's voice dropped, going dangerous. "Because it looks to me like you've been keeping my son deaf on purpose. For profit." The hall erupted in shocked whispers. Darian moved toward the door, but Lucien's guards blocked his path. "That's absurd," Era said. But her voice had lost its smooth confidence. "Those notes are taken out of context. They refer to bone fragments you embedded in my son's skull," Lucien cut in. "To resin you hardened in his ear. To 7 years of treatments that were designed to fail so you could keep charging me for hope." Oren, who'd been quiet until now, suddenly stepped forward. His voice was small but clear, each word careful. "They hurt me," he said. "Every time. The herbs made it worse. The rituals made it worse. But Cala made it better. She took the bad things out." His small hand reached for Cala, who'd made her way down from the gallery. She took it, and Oren pulled her forward, placing her hand in his father's. "She saved me," Oren said simply. The hall went silent. Lucien looked at the joined hands. His son's bridge between the mate he'd rejected and the future he'd almost lost. When he lifted his eyes to Cala's, everything he'd buried for 7 years was written across his face. Then, in front of every wolf who'd watched him reject her, Lucien Draven dropped to his knees. The great Alpha King knelt before an Omega in the center of his hall. "I was wrong," he said, voice rough. 7 years ago, I stood here and called you a liar. I chose politics over you. I chose fear over the mate bond. I chose everything except what mattered." Cala's breath caught. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You came back when I gave you every reason to stay away," Lucien continued. "You risked your life for my son. You did what I should have done 7 years ago. You chose what was right over what was easy. His hands came up, wrapping around hers and Oren's both. I'm asking you now, in front of everyone, not as a king to a subject, but as a wolf to his mate. Forgive me. Come back to me. Let me spend the rest of my life proving I'll never choose wrong again. The hall held its breath. Kala looked down at the most powerful wolf in the realm, kneeling for her, and felt 7 years of pain crack open. Get up, she whispered. Not until you answer. Lucien, I love you, he said. I've loved you since the night the moon chose us. I loved you when I rejected you, even though I was too afraid to fight for it. I loved you every day you were gone, and I'll love you every day you give me from here forward, but I won't get up until you tell me there's a chance. Kala pulled her hand free. For a heartbeat, Lucien's face went blank with devastation. Then she cupped his jaw, tilting his head up the way he'd once done to her. There's a chance, she said. But you're going to have to work for it. Relief crashed over Lucien's face. He surged to his feet, hands framing her face, pulling her close. The kiss he pressed to her forehead was reverent, shaking. I'll work for it every day, he promised against her skin. Around them, the hall erupted, some in celebration, some in shock. But Lucien didn't seem to care about any of it. His forehead pressed to Kala's, Oren between them, the three of them forming their own small circle of healing. What about the healers? Someone called. Lucien's head lifted, alpha power flooding the room. Ira Thorne and Darian Voss are stripped of rank and title. They'll face trial for fraud, child endangerment, and abuse of power. Their assets are seized to repay what they've stolen. Guards moved forward, taking the healers into custody. Ira's face twisted with rage, but she was hauled away before she could speak. When the hall finally cleared, only the three of them remained. Lucien, Kala, and Oren, standing in the same spot where a rejection had once shattered everything. What now? Kala asked quietly. Lucien's thumb brushed her cheek. Now we start over, properly this time. I court you the way I should have 7 years ago. I prove to you that I've learned. And when you're ready, when you trust me again, I ask you to be my Luna. Not because politics demands it, because my wolf chooses you, because my heart chooses you, because my son already loves you, and because I can't imagine ruling this pack with anyone else at my side. That's going to take time, Kala warned. I have time, Lucien said. I have the rest of my life, and I'm going to spend all of it winning you back. Oren tugged on both their hands, pulling them down to his level. When they crouched, he threw his arms around both their necks, hugging them together. Family, he said, trying out the word. Kala's heart cracked open completely. She met Lucien's eyes over their son's head and saw the same hope reflected there. Family, she agreed softly. And in the great hall where everything had once ended, something new began. 3 months passed. Kala moved from the servants' quarters to a room in the royal wing. Not Lucien's room. Not yet. But close enough that Oren could find her when nightmares woke him. Close enough that Lucien could knock on her door in the evenings and ask if she'd join him for dinner. He courted her the way wolves did. With patience, consistency, and small acts of devotion. He brought her rare herbs for her healing work. He built her a greenhouse attached to her chambers where she could grow anything she wanted. He asked her opinion on pack matters and listened when she spoke. He never assumed, never pushed, never demanded. And slowly, carefully, the wounds began to heal. Oren thrived. His hearing grew stronger. His voice grew more confident. He learned to love the sound of rainfall, of wolves howling, of his father's laugh. He followed Kala everywhere, chattering about everything he'd never been able to say before. One evening, as Kala worked in her greenhouse, Lucien found her among the growing things. Moonlight streamed through the glass roof, painting silver across the leaves. I have something to ask you, he said. Kala set down her pruning shears. What? Lucien reached into his coat and pulled out a small carved box. Inside was a pendant on a silver chain, a wolf and moon intertwined, worked in precious metal. This belonged to my mother, he said quietly, and her mother before her. It's meant to be worn by the Luna. Kala's breath caught. I'm not asking you to accept it tonight, Lucien continued. I'm just asking you to think about it, to consider whether you could forgive me enough to stand at my side, whether you could trust me enough to bind our lives together. He set the box in her hands, fingers brushing hers. You don't have to answer now. Take all the time you need. But know this, I will wait. For months, for years, for however long it takes for you to believe that I mean every promise I'm making. Kala looked down at the pendant. It was beautiful, ancient, meaningful, everything a mating gift should be. She looked up at Lucien, at the male who'd broken her heart, and then spent 3 months carefully putting it back together. The male who'd knelt for her in front of his entire pack. The male whose son called her name every morning with joy. "Ask me again at the next full moon," she said. Hope flared in Lucien's eyes. "And you'll give me an answer?" "I'll give you an answer." The full moon came on the first night of autumn. The pack gathered in the clearing where mate bonds were traditionally sealed, where Calla had once stood 7 years ago waiting for a ceremony that never came. This time, Lucien stood at the center of the circle, Orin at his side. Calla emerged from the tree line, wearing a dress the color of moonlight, her hair loose around her shoulders. When she reached him, Lucien dropped to one knee again, not because he had to, but because he wanted everyone to see that he understood what he'd almost lost. "Calla Riven," he said, voice carrying. "The moon chose you 7 years ago, and I was too blind to see the gift I'd been given. I won't make that mistake again. I'm asking you now, in front of the pack and the goddess, to be my mate, my Luna, my equal in all things. Will you accept me?" Calla looked at him, this powerful male kneeling for her, and felt the last piece of her shattered heart click back into place. "Yes," she said. The pack erupted in howls. Lucien stood, pulling the pendant from the box and fastening it around her neck. Then his hands framed her face, and he kissed her. Finally, after 7 years of waiting, of wanting, of wondering if they'd ever get another chance. The kiss was deep, claiming, full of promise and heat, and the mate bond finally allowed to burn without constraint. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, the pack was still howling. Orin crashed into them, hugging them both. "Mom," he said, trying out the word. "Dad. Family." Calla's eyes flooded with tears. She pulled the boy up between them, and Lucien's arms came around them both. "Family," Calla agreed. That night, under a moon so full it looked like silver fire, the Alpha King and his Luna stood before their pack, whole and healed and home. The healers had tried to profit from pain. They'd tried to keep a boy silent and a king desperate. They'd tried to bury a bond the moon had blessed. But an Omega with her grandmother's magic and a heart too stubborn to stay broken had torn down everything they built. And in its place, she'd built something that would last. Love, trust, family. The kind that couldn't be bought. The kind that couldn't be broken. The kind that was worth every risk, every scar, every moment of fear. As Lucien pulled Calla close under the moonlight, his lips at her temple, Orin between them chattering about the stars he could finally name, she realized something. The moon had chosen her 7 years ago. But she'd chosen herself when she came back, and that made all the difference. Before you go, if this story pulled at something inside you, if you felt every moment of Calla's pain and Lucien's redemption, do me one favor. Hit that subscribe button for Ariel Romance Library. Because stories like this, where Omegas rise, Alphas kneel, and love gets a second chance, are what I live for. Drop a comment and tell me, would you have forgiven Lucien? Or would you have walked away? See you in the next story, where wolves howl, hearts break, and the moon always keeps her promises.